大家好. So now let's talk about Virgo. Virgo is symbolized by a young girl who lives in the mountains. Now, why is Virgo sometimes considered a virgin? Because Virgo is a symbol of purity. But in Vedic astrology, we don't just say that Virgo is a virgin, right? We actually consider Virgo to be a Kumarika or Kanya, which is a young girl who hasn't reached puberty yet, and therefore she is pure and a virgin. Now the mountains are also pure. Both the mountains and the young girl, they symbolize purity. Right? Mountain air purifies the mind. Mountain air is actually the cleanest air on earth. Mountain soil is the cleanest soil. The mountains, they are the cleanest place on earth. When it rains, all the dirt gets washed off the mountains until it reaches the lowland, and eventually everything gets washed into the ocean. And so the dirtiest place on earth is the ocean. Right? That's where everything gets washed into. And we'll talk about that more when we get to Pisces. But Virgo is the mountains and the pure place. Right? Virgo is the pure sign because it's the mountains which are clean, and it is the young girl who is pure. So Virgo is striving for the pure and unadulterated thing, right? Virgo wants that original thing that is clear and simple before it gets all adulterated and confused. And that's one reason Mercury is exalted in Virgo, because it wants the clear story, okay? Without all the irrelevant, confusing, additional details, okay? It just wants to have that clear story. And you can see the difference in writing between Gemini and Virgo, right? Gemini people, when they write, they like to write as much as they can, right? They want to say as much as they can about something. When you read it, you have to sort of figure out yourself what is actually useful, what you just read, because there's also a lot of unnecessary stuff that you will find there too. Virgo is going to write about the essence and leave out the rest, right? Of course, it won't be as interesting to read, but it will be to the point and more effective. And that's why Mercury is exalted in Virgo. Gemini wants to show how much fun it is to juggle words, right? And to play around with words. For Gemini, it's more about how they use words than actually giving a clear presentation of the facts, right? And this type of writing is very entertaining and attractive to readers, and so it has its purpose, right? It's more enjoyable to read than the concise and structured writings of Virgo. However, if you want to learn something and you don't want to waste a lot of time, listening to all sorts of ideas and opinions, then Virgo's systematic and clear presentation is actually a lot more beneficial. Now, Virgo is the sign of purity, and Virgo maintains the purity of something, right? Virgo wants to take care of something so that it can stay pure. And with planets in Virgo, we make sure that we maintain the original pure condition, okay? Of course, depending on the condition of Virgo, purity, morality, and virtue can mean something different for, a lot of people. But when Virgo is healthy, a person tries to do something in a way so that it remains spotless and clean. And then they can love it and cherish it, just like the innocent young girl. The other thing about the girl is that a young girl is the most curious creature on earth, right? And there's nothing more curious than a young girl. Young boys are not nearly as curious as young girls, right? Young boys, they will be into one or two things, and they will be also pretty curious, but young girls, they have this feminine, receptivity, and that combined with the curiosity of their, youth, and that makes them really, the most, curious, creatures on earth, right? And that is also Virgo. Virgo is extremely curious, right? Virgo can see more things to examine. And that's another reason why Mercury is exalted in Virgo, right? Virgo is about seeing all the paths that can be examined, checking them out, and then seeing which path is the right one and therefore worth traveling. And Virgo does that better because it's more curious, right? When Mercury is in Virgo or when Mercury is in Gemini, they are both trying to solve a problem, right? The difference is that Gemini will see 3 ways to do so, or 3 possibilities, and Virgo will see 6 possibilities of how to do that, right? Because they're just more curious about other possibilities, okay? They're more open, just like a young girl notices, oh, look, over there, and it just runs there, right? The young girl notices something and it just runs over it. It's just so curious about something that it just saw, and it's looking for more than the young boy would or an adult would do. When Virgo is well disposed, then a person has a healthy curiosity, right? They are able to see things that are worth exploring. And when Virgo is afflicted, then people's curiosity can be diminished, or they have an odd curiosity and they're really motivated to explore things that are just ridiculous and a waste of their time, because they obviously can go nowhere. Okay, they're gonna explore things that will go nowhere, but they spend a lot of time exploring them, thinking, oh, this is really interesting. But that won't really be a healthy exploration. And Virgo is all about a healthy exploration. Now, purity is so important for Virgo, right? The mountains are pure, the mountain air helps you thinking, and it refreshes your mind. And a lot of writers, they like to go to the mountains and have a cabin in the mountains where they write, right? Because they get that mental clarity there. That's another quality of Virgo, mental clarity. That's when your mind is focused and your perception is clear. The other thing that we get when we actually go to the mountains is vision, right? We get a wide vision in the mountains. When we are down on the street, we only really see what's right in front of us. When we go into the mountains, we have a view, right? That's also the quality of Virgo. Virgo has a wide open, unadulterated view of things. In the same way that, young girls can be wide open to so many things, right? But as soon as puberty comes, then so many things, of course, just become not interesting to them anymore. Instead of having these wide open doors of, being the young, curious girls, they become young women. And women become very narrow in what they're seeking happiness from compared to, young girls. But the mountains, when you go there, you have a wide and clear view of things, right? You can see the possibilities when you are up at the top. And Mercury in Gemini can, of course, also see a lot of possibilities. That's like getting up high in those skyrise buildings, right? You can get a panorama view of the city, but Virgo on a mountain can get up much higher and get a better, clearer, and broader perspective. It can see many more possibilities than anyone else. And so the highest points actually on Earth are the mountains of Virgo. And the lowest points are in the ocean, and we talk about that more when we get to Pisces.